So this is a lunch and learn and a meetup all at once. And obviously the last time I did this deck, I had it set up as a show to auto advance. So read it quick. We've been doing Spokane DevOps Meetups, fourth Tuesday or third Tuesday or some Tuesday in the month. We've been doing them in the evening, and I decided that I wanted to share the content with my coworkers who never showed up for the meetings, but I wasn't going to mention that on the recording. So I'm going to double down on my time and do both meetup and lunch and learn at the same time. So there are a number of people who have expressed interest both inside the company and outside the company of IntelliTech on GitHub Advanced Security. We're spending some time implementing it at our clients. I'm foisting it on some of our internal projects. Because it's a good thing. So in any event, we do have a couple of other meetups. You can see us on social media. Let's see, what else am I going to do? Man, nice timing. I don't know what's going on. This is like, everything works fine until you start presenting. So we're going to let Aaron edit that out. Good luck. Good luck, Aaron, with editing this out. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the content, which is GitHub Advanced Security. Sure.
Happy birthday. Good to you. I love the shirt. Yes.
Okay, intro to GitHub Advanced Security. So what I'm hoping to cover today is why we care, what is it, how do we use it? Why do we care? Well, I think we all get it, right? Data breaches are expensive. Average data breach, 3.86 million. This is from a couple of years ago, based on IBM research. And again, not hard to understand. We read about them, we see them in the news. We understand that they're real expensive. There's a lot that we don't hear about, but those that we do hear about, obviously are very significant. None of us wants this to happen to us for software that we build. We're familiar with a lot of different technologies that we've used in DevOps and development over the years. GitHub Advanced Security has been around for a few years. It's a little bit different spin on the approach, but we get the why, right? I think the other thing to keep in mind, there are certainly lots of reasons why breaches are caused, but based on this study, 53% of them are caused by weakness in applications. So this goes beyond spam email or different kinds of attacks. This is actually weakness in applications and applications getting attacked and brought down. So any debates about why we care about security? No debates. We all care. We don't want to deal with it, but we know we care. So GitHub Advanced Security, what is it? It's really a couple of different things. There's dependency analysis. Any of us who have been doing GitHub-based open source development for a while have at least probably have encountered Dependabot or have run into Dependabot or have had Dependabot run into us. One of those things. One of the above. GitHub Advanced Security also adds a code scanning component, static analysis, static execution analysis. GitHub has also included secret scanning over the last few years, automated secret scanning. And another key component to this, especially for enterprises, or really for enterprises, are integrated alerts and a security dashboard. So there's some built-in security, built-in alerting with each of these components, and then GitHub Advanced Security adds a security dashboard. The features of GitHub Advanced Security are enabled for all public repos on github.com. There's some configurations that aren't available. There's also some features that are enabled by default and cannot be disabled if you're on a public repo on github.com. If you're on a private repo, you do have some of these features, but not very many of them. If you're in a private repo, to get the full advanced security features, you need to be in a GitHub Enterprise account and have GitHub Advanced Security enabled, which is a pay feature. Both GitHub Enterprise and GitHub Advanced Security are for pay features. I think a reasonable cost benefit analysis, if you've got a decent amount of code, is going to come out positive for GitHub Advanced Security because it does quite a bit for you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about dependency scans. Again, how many of you are familiar with Dependabot, right? You've heard of Dependabot. Everybody knows what Dependabot is. So Dependabot will flag security vulnerabilities. If you're on a public repo, you can have it invoke or create pull requests for you, right? So rather than you having to go in, create a pull, get the right version, et cetera, it does this for you, right? Saving you time and therefore money sometimes. You can also have Dependabot do version dependency updates for you. So some teams like to pin version dependencies and never upgrade until they have to. Other teams want to aggressively update. So the dependency update portion of Dependabot will actually invoke pull requests for you when Dependabot detects that, hey, there's a new version of dependency. So it doesn't have to be a security vulnerability or a CVE, but it can just be, hey, there's a new version of this dependency that you're using. Here's a pull request for you. Merge it into your code.
So now one of the things I found with Dependabot is that it feels like sometimes I get a lot of noise. Is there a way that, am I doing something wrong, or like sometimes we're just back on a version because they break something? Like you literally have a package, especially in the wild west of NPM, right?
Yeah.
You have some deep package, and there's no way I'm going to update that because I'm going to wait till everything else updates. Are there any settings or knobs and levers on that stuff?
Not a lot. It's fairly all or nothing. There is some configuration. Love it when links work. There is some configuration that you can do with regards to the dependency checking, and you can do some pinning. So you can pin versions. So and tell it, hey, I'm going to update these, but not others. But I mean, you know what the game is, right? Because especially in NPM land with websites, right? There's going to be version dependencies that you can't upgrade.
Right. Yeah, you just can't.
So then you end up getting stuck, and then it's like,
Right.
Everything gets stuck. So you might as well just
goes crazy, and it's already told you should upgrade 5 times, and you can't even move off this version of
right.
Yeah, so.
And then you probably want to turn it off.
And then I start ignoring it, and it's like, I really don't want to ignore it because it's right about some things, right?
Right. It's right about some things. I think the other thing too is as things nest together, if there's a replacement, it will detect a supersede. So if you have, it'll know, hey, there's another version update that we're going to do for you. It'll supersede and retire the old PR.
Cool.
I think the only 3 things I've seen that have helped reduce noise for me, at least, is like you can ignore certain packages. And so like some of them, I'm just like, I'm going to do this manually. The second one is you can control how many PRs are open at one time. So then you're like, you only deal with a certain amount at a time. And the third one is like what it actually bumps on. So it can bump on like what major, minor, or patch. And so I'll just bump that up a little higher, and then I'm like, okay, and that significantly reduces. And how often, because you can also reduce the check from like daily to monthly to weekly to whatever.
Yeah, by default, I think it's daily.
Yeah.
So.
I was talking about the impact is too much.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's how I've reduced noise, and it helps a little bit. Like if you're only bumping every major version and every week, it's a lot less. And you only have 10 POs open at one time or 5, then a lot easier to hand manage than daily and patch.
So again, here's an example of a PR that was created for me. And it's creating a standard PR. So on this particular repo, I'm saying I need a review, and merging is going to be blocked. And it's doing all my other checks, right? So it's not going to ignore any of the other checks that you have on your repo, any of the other code scanning that you have. And since I'm not going to review that or ask anybody else to review it, do you want to review it for you? No, I'm just going to go ahead and merge. So. So you also have some configurability over alerting. It's going to alert, send email alerts to owners and committers by default. This is not exactly what I wanted, but yeah, the bottom line is with the configuration. So it's going to support various package managers. I think the most popular ones that we use are already going to be supported, including things like Docker. There's actually Terraform support. So for those of us who do DevOps and Terraform, we're pulling in modules, Terraform dependent modules. So it will actually detect those as well and let you know. Again, our general practice is to always update and don't pin. At least that's what I recommend to people and try to follow on my own for Terraform in particular. But that's, again, sometimes you don't want to do that or it's not possible or whatever. So there's some nice configurability there.
One thing I've noticed with the dependent bot just putting those updates out for you, especially with NPM packages, is that it just isn't always, you don't always want to do that update because it will break all your other packages. And it's like, it doesn't seem to test its update that it recommends with the other updates that it recommends. And then you merge these two updates together and everything kind of breaks.
So I think theoretically it's providing an update that it thinks is compatible. So it'll detect if it can't update because there's a dependency that it can't update. It will detect that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that once you accept the PR, everything's gonna work. So, and again, this goes back to Grant's point. You can do some pinning, but I think the problem with that is as soon as you start pinning, things start to get out of control. Or, it's not out of control, but you might as well just turn it off at that point and, retake control, retake manual control. Do you have like specific examples of where something will break on you?
So I guess a really specific example is mainly the breaking change between like view 2 and view 3.
Okay.
And then coalesce and not being able to update those specific packages, but then some other packages that we can update. As soon as you go too far, they don't quite work with these older ones that we're using. So we have some packages that we just have to stay on these older versions and some packages that we technically could update, but at some point they might just break because we have these older packages that they're now not going to work well with. We did have it on for one of our repositories and it caused a number of issues.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not perfect. And, again, I don't think this is a magic answer. I think if you can get away with it, use it. I don't really develop that much for a living, so it's easy for me because I have like demo repos and I just turn it on and I say, yeah, sure, take it. And I'm all good. But, obviously more complex projects, that's going to be a problem. So.
This package or security flags like, oh, I just want when there's a major vulnerability has been patched, notify me of that. So like,
Yes.
packages like
Yes. there is some configurability. Again, I don't have a bunch of demos for this. But, you know, it may be worth, you know, a deeper dive, right? Session 2 to get into some of these scenarios to see how it can really help you.
Yeah, and Kevin made a comment, he said he wanted a little more detail. Andrew provided a little more, especially things like TOLA. And it really comes down to where you have projects that have dependencies on other things that aren't moving forward, maybe at the rate. If you're all right out in front, it's a small project, it's only been around for a little while, those are relatively simple. But when you have large dependency graphs and things like that, and you're saying, hey, we're not releasing this until it reaches a certain level of maturity, I mean, those are the times when you get into the situation where you don't want the bleeding edge stuff. Right? I do not want to update my packages. I want to do that manually. But it's nice to be able to know, oh, hey, these are the packages that I can take. So
I feel like it just includes like my pull request area though.
it does. Yeah.
Yeah, Austin, under that security tab, if there's a security vulnerability, it'll try to generate a patch for you automatically for a lot of them.
I'm sorry, what, you made a comment there. So if you can take one of these, again, we're a little bit ahead. This particular repo doesn't have any Dependabot failures, but there's some code scans, which we'll get into in a minute.
If you click on one of those, it'll actually try to like generate at the top somewhere.
Well, so you can create an issue to capture it. You can also dismiss alerts. So, but again, that's code scanning, which is next topic. So again, there as Benji, I heard that's your name, Benji. That's what you want to be referred to as.
Wow, this is new.
Is that new? Is that new? Wait, what? I'm saying something new. Thank you, Ben. Again, there is a configuration YAML that you can go in and play some games with your configuration. Sorry, close a bunch of these.
There's a question.
Yep.
Are Dependabot code scanning and secret scanning enabled by default in GitHub?
So for a public repo, you have Dependabot alerts by default.
So Dependabot's on by default.
Dependabot is on by default. Pull requests, generating pull requests are not on by default.
So
you can figure that.
Pull requests
not on by default. You can turn that on again. That so you don't have to generate the PR.
Right.
Then the third component of this, and heck, let's just go into the settings. If we go into code security and analysis, so again, it's going to vary based on whether you're in a public repo on GitHub, a private repo on GitHub, or you're on a private repo in GitHub Enterprise with GitHub Advanced Security. So there's sort of the three different scenarios. This happens to be a GitHub Enterprise with GitHub Advanced Security, this particular repo. And you can enable or disable the dependency graph, which is going to be on by default in a public repo. Dependabot alerts are going to be on by default in a public repo. Dependabot security alerts, security updates, which is that generating a PR for you, you can enable that.
So
and you can, it's off by default. You can enable it on a public repo. This version update is not available to you on a public repo.
It's only available if you're in an enterprise repo.
This is available if you're in an sorry. There's like too many options.
There's too many options, right?
So
that's a normal update.
Let's go to github.com. Let's go to, pick anyone. This is a public repo in my account. So if we go to settings, we go to GitHub Advanced Security and Analysis. I can configure version updates. I can disable, again, this is a public repo. So I can actually get version updates on a public repo. If I made this private, I would not get the features. So they're promoting that public repo bit. Okay. So
We're gonna cover the code scanning and secret scanning here.
code scanning is next,
Everyone, I hope this is answering your questions.
at least at some level. It's hard to do an intro in an hour.
Yeah, especially if people ask questions.
Well, no, I'd rather people ask questions. We'll keep going. All right, so CodeQL is the technology behind code scanning. This was a purchased product a couple of years ago. GitHub bought the company called Semel, which is a whole bunch of researchers out of Oxford doing interesting things. And over the last several years, they've been incorporating that tool into GitHub, into the GitHub experience. The way CodeQL works is it basically generates a database of your code, and then it allows you to write queries against the code. For some of us who have taken the GitHub Advanced Security Bootcamp from GitHub, they spent a whole bunch of time telling you how to write your own queries. I'm not, again, I think that's a use case. I haven't run into it in the wild just yet, but beware that you can, write your own queries against the database that CodeQL is generating for you. The neat thing about CodeQL is there's a big community out there with significant contributions from the top companies, Microsoft, GitHub themselves, which I guess they're the same company now or whatever. Maybe they're not, independently operated, wholly owned subsidiary or something. IBM, Oracle, you name it, they're out there contributing to the CodeQL queries that are running to scan your code. So the nice thing about this is it's open source, community driven. You're not left with some private company with a private security scanning, updating their software to get a security scan into your code. So again, the code scanning that you can do, static code analysis, looking for patterns in your code, but it will also query how your code executes. Currently supported languages, most of the ones we care about, C, C++, number one, of course, but JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Ruby. If the code is compiled, it runs, the CodeQL will run on the compiled code. If it's a non-compiled language, aka Python, JavaScript, TypeScript, it actually runs on the source code. So it's not compiled, obviously. So let's take a look at a few of these. So I've got a simple C# demo. This was generated, this is a .NET new generated code. If I go into settings, go into code security analysis, I can, this is already running, I configure Dependabot. I have a new one, a new repo that we'll go into just so you see the first time experience. But basically what happens here when I add code scanning is it's creating a GitHub action that runs the code scans on your repo. And it takes advantage of some of the built-in features and functions of GitHub Advanced Security. So, hello, that's the Dependabot URL. That was fascinating. What did I just do there? Yes, there we go. So let me back up a second here. Give me just a quick sec. We're going to go into samples. We're going to go into repositories. We're going to go into this one, N. We're going to go into settings, and we are going to code security analysis. So this is a brand new .NET new generated repo, and I'm going to set up code scanning. So we're going to configure code scanning, and I have a lot of options here. I'm presented with CodeQL analysis, which is the default built-in from GitHub that supports all the languages we just talked about, C++, blah, 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 Ruby. You also see that there are other integrations, which we'll take a look at in a second, from third parties. So it integrates with third parties, but let's take a look at CodeQL, this CodeQL analysis first. And now what you can see is it generated a GitHub action, creating a file for me in GitHub Workflows, CodeQL. And then at this point, this is a standard action. It's going to run whenever I push to a branch and whenever I do a pull request. The nice thing about having it in the pull request flow is this can then now become a status check for my code to make sure that it passes before I can accept a pull request or I get the results of the analysis in a pull request. We have a matrix strategy. In this case, it detected. I didn't put the C# or JavaScript in, but we're all familiar with GitHub or likely familiar with GitHub. It regularly scans your repos to determine what sort of code you have in it. So it's using those properties to figure out what default action that it's going to provide for you. I could easily add another language here just by going, hey, well, I've also got some C++ that you didn't notice, or I've just added some C++ to this repo. I can have that run a matrix strategy. The rest of this is initializing CodeQL. So again, once it's initialized in a run, it will start to track. If you run a compile, it takes notices, hey, there's a compile going on here. I'm going to take that compiled code and build up my database that I'm then going to run queries on to analyze your code. There's an auto build step here that it's going to detect whether it can build your code or not. Again, if it's JavaScript or TypeScript, it's not going to do a build. If it's C#, it's going to run an auto build. And there is varying success here. I actually tried to configure this on Coalesce, which is the project you guys just talked about. No chance. It's not auto building. And I spent a few minutes trying to set up a build and then gave up. It's a little bit more complicated. A few more minutes or another half hour, or if one of you all or Andrew went in there, I'm sure he could set up the build and get it running pretty quickly. By the same token, this other project that we have running, the infamous Storming the Castle, auto built, no problem.
What do you mean?
So it's running. What's that?
What do you mean infamous?
Infamous. I mean the famous, the soon to be famous.
I mean, Phil.
Well, the Scrum Master's out of control. The product owner does, stuff that the stakeholders. Wait, we're not here to talk about that. Okay, so we run our build, and then with this auto build action, again, this is a CodeQL action. Then we do a analyze. What happens on the analyze? It's running queries, and then it generates a serif file. The acronym I knew at one point, or I know, but I can't remember what it is. So if somebody can remember what serif stands for, standard acronym in the industry, standard format. It actually takes that serif file and uploads it to GitHub Advanced Security, and then we can do interesting things with that code. So I'm going to go ahead and start the commit and let this run. But then we're going to go back to that other repo, we're going to pull that other repo out of the oven because the scan's already run. It takes a couple of minutes. We only have a couple of minutes right now. So, again, this is the same CodeQL scan that we just generated, but it's already run. And if I go to security and the security tab, oops, if Phil could navigate, he'd be in the right repo, but he can't apparently. Let's go here to this one. Trust me, it's the same one, but we'll take a look at the security scan. And what's interesting about this is code that it's detected in JavaScript dependencies. So nothing detected in the C#. That's good, because all we did was a .NET new. But all we did was add that new, and it detected some issues in jQuery, which somebody tell me why .NET New pulls in jQuery, but hey, that's a different story. So that's what we're getting. I can take a look at this, and we were talking about this a little bit before. I could say, hey, this is in a dependent. I'm not going to in a dependent module. I'm not going to fix it, so I can dismiss this alert. I can also create a new issue out of it, so I can track, and then maybe use that issue to branch the code, update it, and so I've got a nice workflow that's built into the process here, right? The thing that I really like about this, and I think that's a significant advantage of this tool, is I'm in my GitHub workflow, right? I'm in my GitHub lifecycle. I'm doing PRs. I'm developing normally. I'm not waiting for SonarQube to run for a half hour or a day or however long. SonarQube, great tool, et cetera. But the big disadvantage of SonarQube is it's run on a separate system. It's not integrated into my workflow. I might get the result, but then I got to take the result and figure out what I'm going to do with it. So it's, this I'm prompted to fix the issues right when I create them.
What's the false positive do? Does that report to GitHub?
So it might be in tests. There might be in a test, like it's not really a failure.
Okay, it's just a flag for you. It doesn't.
Correct. It's not going to influence the. I don't think it influences directly the results of the code scans. So again, I think that's actually described there. So
how do you dial down CodeQL? Because we've had some cases where it takes a really long time and whatnot, speed it up. How do you tune it down on? Because like there's no action things where we can tune it down on PRs versus not, and that's fairly simple. But what does it actually take in for its parameters to tone it down?
There's a couple of configuration options. By default, it's going to run all queries. And they're depending on the language you're in. Again, we talked about this database, the database that it generates, and then these queries that the community is contributing to. Those queries are tagged, so you can specify which set of queries you want to run. Like, so for example, and I've got an example of this. I'll just switch to PowerShell real quick, and then we'll review that again. So this is a PowerShell. What I really like about this is our Azure DevOps tools, where all the good code was written by Meg and all the bad code was written by Phil. But in spite of that, PowerShell, the code scanning here hasn't found any alerts, which is really cool. But this will detect, for example, things like extra commas in places. So it's like a syntax check. So if I didn't want the syntax checking, I could turn that off. And again,
is that a config file that controls that, or what's that?
There is there is.
What tool, CodeQL, which third-party one do you use for PowerShell?
It is right here. It is from Microsoft, and it's called PS Script Analyzer. And that action GUID was generated by, that was generated by Microsoft. I didn't type that in. Because again, I went in there, it detected, hey, PowerShell, or no, I think I said PowerShell. And then you can see here, include rule, include these two rules, and don't include others, right? So there's also, you could have it. So for example, on the famous or soon to be famous Storming the Castle, if we wanted to speed that up, we could have it just run a security scan and have it run syntax checks at night. But I think in my ideal world, I want them all run there at that time, at time of PR, because if it's a syntax check, or if it's a style issue, I don't want to wait till tomorrow to fix it. I want to resolve it now. So, and again, understood that, hey, there are times when, 5 minutes is too long for code scan to run. So, you certainly can get yourself into a position. This is a action, just like any other action. You could overwrite it, not require it, so you have options there. The other thing, so again, this is the basic syntax for including or not. Because this isn't the built-in action, we're giving it a parameter to send my output to a Serif file, and then I've got another action here to upload the Serif file. Okay, so I get that. The nice thing about this PowerShell, but if I go to the code scanning, again, I could generate one, but again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to generate an issue. But it shows up the issues. If it scans and finds issues, it's going to show up just as if it was C# built in or anything else. And one thing I like, we talk about Terraform a lot. There's also a Terraform scan, and this one, in fact, if we take a look at this again, this is Terraform. It's a third party, but it's showing up just like any others. I click into here and I can see what's it complaining about. Oh, it needs to be TLS 1.2. All right, fine. We all understand that. But wait, that's the default. Why the heck are you telling me about that if it's the default when I spin up a storage account? Well, there's two schools of thought here. One is I could say dismiss the alert. This is a false positive because I know Azure Storage Account is TLS 1.2 by default. So that'd be one approach. The other approach is, well, be explicit, right? Don't let somebody be confused. How come they're not specifying? And again, I can go to this code quickly. Again, I probably don't want to go through the hassle. You guys get the basic idea here. I can add the TLS 1.2, commit the code, and clear up that issue. And again, I'm going to see those. I set my branch protection rules, include that status check. That becomes a validator for me when I push stuff in the PR. This is a really nice win for Terraform, doing Terraform development.
Will it automatically close security issues at once you push that change, or do you have to manually push it still? Because I know some things are kind of automated with that.
My experience so far is you need to close them. Unfortunately, it'd be nice if they auto closed, but they don't appear to. Okay, so again, we talked about some of these options. You can crank error levels up or down. So you want to, obviously the default would be set this to, hey, if there's warnings generated, make it fail a build. Large repos where there's a lot of issues, he says to the people on a particular team that we have that has a whole big bunch of Python code, none of whom are in this room right now. You might want to set the error level a little lower to get started and just kind of take things a little bit at a time to get yourself up to the point where you can say, fail this when I'm at warnings. Again, we talked about this. You can configure rules, paths. There's two levels of path filtering. So there's path filtering at the action. Hey, if I update a document, don't run a code scan. If I update my Markdown, README Markdown, don't run a code scan. And then there's also a CodeQL config file where you can say, don't run scans on this path or that path. And for storming the castle, it may well be that it's, running code scans on dependencies that we don't care about. That's, because again, what should be happening is once you run those scans, it should go from 4 minutes. Hey, you just did a PR and you only changed one line of code. It should be pretty quick to run that scan. So I'm thinking that what it's probably doing is running the scan across a bunch of dependencies that it shouldn't probably be running against.
And we could do it, and you could probably configure, it sounds like for if we only added JavaScript files, only run the JavaScript ones, we don't need.
Yes.
So then. Yeah,
it's already running in parallel. So it's running the JavaScript and C# in parallel. The JavaScript only takes a minute or something like that. It's the C# that in that particular repo.
So we can say if we haven't edited any C# files, don't bother check.
Don't bother check them. Right, exactly. That's going to be a little bit more sophisticated to set up, and you may, but I mean, it's not hard, right? I mean,
GitHub Actions.
it's fairly trivial.
Just
So-
added it to a TypeScript program of mine. It took about 3.5, 4 minutes to do just a TypeScript view scan. I mean, it's not horrible, but
And is it doing that? And I think the question is, if you make a minor change, then is it also taken 3 or 4 minutes? But because again, that time it should only be scanning your changed code and then adding that to the existing result. So that's what should be happening. Again, like anything. It's a work in progress. What's that?
It leverages Git to isolate the changes.
Yes. Yes, it's only, it should only be scanning the code you change. Thank you. Okay, so secret scanning. This is built into all public repos by default. So again, anything you commit will be scanned for secrets, and there's a number of secret scanning patterns on this link down below. With private repos, you have some additional configuration options. With private repos, again, you need GitHub Advanced, whatever, all the GHE, GHAS stuff. And with that, you can exclude files, you can do configurable notifications, you can add security groups. You can also add your own patterns. So if you have at the organization or enterprise level, you're doing something that you want to make sure doesn't get committed to your repo, you can add custom scanning. What's also interesting about this is there's some auto remediation built in. So if it detects,
when does it do the scan?
when you push.
And is it pushed in and then scanned, or is the push actually scanned and then not committed?
So by public repos, it's going to be committed and then it's running the scan in the background. With GitHub Advanced Security, there is push. You can have it reject a push, stop a push.
What we found is that not only is this scanning your repo, but the public repos are being scanned all the time.
Yeah.
For people looking for these things. And
Yeah.
it's not like, it only takes a few, sometimes moments. So I just encourage people, if you push a secret to your repo, even if it was only for a moment before you took it out and pushed it back and undid the commit, whatever it was, assume it's compromised.
Yep. And with partners, GitHub partners, they're bringing people on all the time. They will auto remediate or auto
Deactivate.
They'll invalidate the token for you.
Yeah, right, okay.
They're also going back over your entire repo history. So they're not just looking at your latest commit, they're scanning the entire commit history, right? Because you say, oh crap, I committed a secret, I didn't mean to. You overwrite the commit, but don't delete the nuke the history. It's still there, and it can be scanned by people.
This is really important, especially if you're doing some offline development, just on a little thing, you happen to check some things in early and often, you get a secret put in there, and then 20 commits later, you say, oh, let me push that up to GitHub, and then boom, now I have stuff that I don't want to have it.
Yep. And again, I have a link here somewhere, but you get the idea. Let's see.
Yeah, well, Bill looks for that. Kevin did note that you do get a cron job on your CodeQL stuff as well, kind of as an out-of-the-box feature. So.
Yeah, it runs every week by default, but obviously you can change it. Yeah. It's a GitHub action, so you can run it more frequently if you want. And again, that's maybe a reasonable compromise. You want to do some scanning at PR time, but you don't want to do all the scanning. It's taking too long. Then run it nightly or every couple of hours or something like that. That's probably even better. Just running every couple of hours in the background. Then it's not interrupting your PR process, but it's close to the time of when you committed the code, which is really the key thing here, right? You don't want to delay even by hours if you can avoid it. The time from the time you commit to the time you have to go fix the code, because we're all onto something else, right? Or if it's me, it's 5 minutes, but squirrel,
When we're
whatever.
talking about security, we should probably shouldn't use the word compromise.
No compromises.
Yeah, you said we should, the compromises that we could do this, and then they.
Well,
I'm just
so,
kidding, it's don't.
right, I mean, the classic is these, and it's a key point, right? I mean, even a small scan with SonarQube can take a while. So you're way separated. And again, there's some nice integration features, but still, you're still separated from that, your development lifecycle, your development flow. Where's PowerPoint? Yeah, here it is. So, and secret scanning, same sort of thing. You'll get a notification like I have as I've been setting up demos and stuff that, hey, there's a compromised, and it detected, I get an email, I click on the email and I'm brought to the, everybody write this down real quick. Haha, too bad. It's not valid, but you can try to use it if you want. DevOps personal access token that was committed into what repo here, Azure DevOps tools. And I believe this is probably, so here, this was back in February or something. We didn't have our git ignore set correctly. I'm doing some testing. I configure a VS Code launch. I mean, it doesn't take much to goof up. VS Code should be ignored, obviously.
Will it
But
tell
it
you if
wasn't.
it's retracted the secret from a partner or not, or will it just say it's compromised?
It will attempt to remediate the token.
Will it tell you if they did that?
It should. And again, this was from back in February or something when this thing was originally.
So I'm just trying to figure out, like, if you then go, do you then know, hey, has this been dealt with? I don't need to worry with it, or do I need to go log in and find out where this token is and deal with it?
Yeah, it should tell you. And again, it's only, it should tell you that it's compromised. And, I went back and looked and, made sure that none of my secrets are compromised. And again, this originally happened back in February. So, and again, this is DevOps. So this is where, let's see, I think, did I show you this before? Oops. Depending on the repo that I'm in, again, this, yeah, of course it is. Of course it's running low. Careful when we do this. I may lose the,
Does it just have a plug? So in there.
so it should at least get me. Yeah, there we go. We're good. Wow. You almost pulled the fill. If only. It's been a while since I've done that. Keep everything away from me. I'm due for another spilled keyboard spilling error. Okay, so again, this was the PowerShell. I don't think we saw this before. I'd say there's an extra comma here. So the key thing to point here, it is looking at syntax issues as well as security issues. And this is that, that body of queries that people are adding all the time. Okay, so reporting. That's the other cool thing about this. And again, this is exclusive to GitHub Advanced Security, but for organizations, this is a really key feature. So I'm looking at an organization. This is a GitHub Enterprise with GitHub Advanced Security. So I'm getting a nice dashboard view of all the scans. What's particularly important to one of our customers is coverage and identifying, hey, I've got 6 enabled, but I've got 5 disabled. Why isn't code security enabled on those 5 disabled? So I can click on that link and I can see, all right, here's the repos where it's not enabled. And I can see, because I set this up by default for the organization, development teams don't have to worry about Dependabot. They don't have to worry about secret scanning. Code scanning, as we saw, that's an action and a workflow. So a little bit tough probably to set up by default. And in fact, with one customer, we debated, let's set it up and let it fail, and then people have to fix it. or, you know, you leave it alone and you just come up with some approach to hassle them to get this turned on for their code scan.
How's Dependabot automatically set up if you're dealing with different
So
libraries and such, depending on your projects?
it will auto
Detect.
Now, obviously, the issue is if you have, you know, something that's a little bit unusual, or the way you set up your, the way you located your package manager is a little bit unusual. It's not going to detect it, but if it can detect it, it's going to run. Yeah, and then again, based on the package manager's support, they'll have standard, you know, configuration, you know, standard configuration that it's going to detect. But again, there are times when it's off, or you have, you're going to want to configure it anyway because of these scenarios that we talked about, right?
And it doesn't update itself. So like if you have an empty repo and start committing, you might end up with NuGet and then you add on npm. And so it doesn't update, right? Automatically.
So you can have it update automatically.
Oh, you can.
Yeah.
With your new, as you add things in, that it'll automatically keep the list up to date.
Good question. I haven't
I'm just thinking
tried
if you do like .NET new and then you add in like you add in
npm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Will it automatically be like, oh, I also need to now check this, or like then add in a GitHub action? Well, then they keep your GitHub action versions up to date because now you have GitHub actions and you're referencing something. Yeah,
good question. I haven't actually tried that. So follow-ups. So again, cool thing, reporting, that's a key component of this. And there's reporting both at the org level. There's also some at the enterprise level. The org level dashboard is a lot nicer though. Okay, so security practices. I think in addition to these things, you really want continuous deployment. Whole point is we're talking about finding and fixing things soon. Well, it's no good if it's not deployed. So, you know, key security practices, continuous deployment. Continuous deployment depends on continuous integration. And, you know, we talked about, we referred to a particular project that we're working on that has like a zillion issues. It's way better to take a couple of those and resolve them a little at a time than say, oh my gosh, we got to do like 3 sprints and just fix these security issues. You know, whatever. Just fix a couple at a time. You don't have to stop everything to fix these things.
Yeah, fix them, get them integrated, and get them deployed to production.
Yeah.
I think is really the key. Get them all the way up there.
Get them out. And that's, you know, again, if you're only deploying once every quarter, you can only put security fixes in once every quarter. It's, you know, you're stuck, right? So, you know, for when disaster strikes, you want to be ready to go. All right, so takeaways. So these security features are really easy to configure. Obviously, there's complexity once you get past the intro phase here, but it's almost no excuse configuration. With GitHub Advanced Security, it's built in. I said it several times here, flow, you know, built into the development flow. The key thing to point out here is this is static analysis, you know, execution analysis that GitHub can figure out based on or determine based on your code base. That doesn't preclude if I'm building containers, I want to scan my containers for security and dependent. You know, containers get built up out of dependent containers. You want to make sure that those are clean. There's the same level of diligence applied to containers and what your container dependencies are. And then this also does not handle dynamic scans on your deployments. So we're looking at things that might get through your code. There's going to be scenarios that are going to show up in the real world that you're still going to want to test for that are not perhaps based on the way your infrastructure is configured, might not necessarily be your code or your dependent services, et cetera, et cetera. You know, your login service, right? Well, that's not part of your code. That's some third party. Well, if you're not checking it, you may have an issue there. So you still want to do some of these other security practices as well. This is not a be all and end all, is the point there. Bunch of references. The docs for GitHub Advanced Security are pretty good. And there's other additional things happening. For example, there's a CodeQL extension for Visual Studio Code. which you can use to scan your code locally if you want to do that. So, you know, at time of development, it's generally tailored at writing CodeQL queries, but you could also use it to, you know, scan your code from Visual Studio. There's an emerging security manager role as well in GitHub. And I think that is it. And miracle of miracles, I finished 5 minutes early.
There you go. You know, I would plug one more thing. If you haven't tried GitHub Copilot, you should really try it. I mean, it's worth a try. I was very skeptical, but it's honestly, it saved me tons of time.
Free for students.
Free for students.
How do you feel about that? Just like the slide rule versus the calculator argument all over again?
It works really well in long answer questions. I'm just gonna say that.
It's a really nice feature. So I mean, it's not exactly the same as this, but I think it's maybe some of the same tech behind it. GitHub's doing some great stuff, coordinated with Microsoft, and it's good stuff.
I think it is pretty cool. I mean, again, it's whatever, $10 a month for.
Yeah, I'm paying
like,
for
can it save you 10 minutes or 5 minutes or an hour? I mean, it's like a gimme. It's easy, right?
It's easily work.
So next for the DevOps /Meetups, in January, Mike Kern is going to present on Playwright. December, you know, given that I think the whatever Tuesday we're on is the 22nd of December, not real fired up about doing December, but if what I was thinking is potentially we might have some fun doing lightning talks. If somebody wants to do 5 or 10 minutes, you know, Git tricks, you know, stuff like that. I don't know. I had a bunch of them in my head, but I can't remember any of them now. But, you know, if people want to do 5 or 10 minutes, we just get around a round table.
Have you had any interest in like any tooling like Gitkraken or anything like that?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I am totally open.
I don't know if there's anybody that can speak to that. Or...
You know, what really intrigues me is other tools. I mean, we spend a lot of time in GitHub and Microsoft space. I am always open to hear the way other people are doing stuff. So
Kevin volunteered to talk about Gitkraken.
I'm not going to talk about Gitkraken. Kevin's going to talk
Kevin
about
volunteered for it right there. I made
December. All right, you're on.
You even got
Fun with Git and Gitkraken.
I'd like to see that.
Then obviously this was intro. We touched on the surface of securing. I think there's a couple of interesting scenarios here that, you know, we could definitely go deeper on, and sort of a level 2 if we cared to. There has been some discussion about ADO versus GitHub. There's actually been some recent movement in this space around ADO. So if people are interested in that, we can do another.
And ADO
is Azure DevOps. Thank you, Grant. Way to go. Good job. I appreciate your assistance. Anything else? Any other questions, concerns,
Good,
input, feedback?
Thanks, Bill. Great job.